All right. Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, good evening. On behalf of the DoRight Initiative, I warmly welcome you to this evening's monthly webinar and conversation. The DoRight Initiative is a national, on behalf of the DoRight Initiative, I really welcome you this evening. And the DoRight Initiative is a national movement mobilizing like-minded Nigerians who understand the actual damage that lawlessness and moral decadence have done to our nation, and the imperative of reversing this, just galvanizing all of us together to join in developing a movement that initiates a rebirth, new mindset, where every Nigerian sincerely desires to do the right thing every time and everywhere. And we do this, our vision is to reawaken and to entrench uprightness in Nigeria, and we do this through the entrenchment of our values, which are integrity, diligence, respect, compassion, justice, courage, and meritocracy. You know, a few hours ago, I was thinking about the fact that in the mid-1990s, and I guess at what I'll describe as the height of military dictatorship in Nigeria, I thought that this country was at the lowest. However, regardless of the circumstances then, we tried to hold on to the promise of a future that though existed somewhere in our subconscious, or let me say our wishful subconscious. But we look at it today, almost 3 decades down the line, the future seems more bleak than even what it was then. And as it is today, it is clear that without a conscious and intentional definition and curation of the future that we seek, the task of building a new Nigeria becomes an elusive mirage, to say the least. The tendency for us as citizens is to abdicate our responsibility of building a new Nigeria to a few class of people we define as leaders. And I guess that is why we have remained in a state of inanition. At the DoRight Awareness Initiative, we opine that to build a new Nigeria of our dreams, it will take a collective and effective collaboration of micro efforts that can be aggregated into massively impactful changes. And that forms part of the crux of our conversation this evening. Tonight, to help us steer this thing properly, we are joined with a very exceptional young Nigerian who needs absolutely no introduction. Someone I refer to as a true beacon of light and the epitome of impact in lifting children from disadvantaged backgrounds onto the global stage. His own story particularly is one of the most inspirational journeys of any Nigerian anywhere on this planet. He's the convener of Chess in Slums and a Guinness World Record holder. And today he joins us all the way from New York, United States of America. Please welcome with me, Mr. Tunde Omokoye. Tunde, good evening. How are you doing?
Yeah, good afternoon from New York City. Thank you very much. Very kind introduction. It'd be flattering as well, but I'll take it. And I'm really glad to be here to join the conversation and just help us maybe find new perspective, because I think at this time in the country, there's no question that this may very well be one of the toughest times, for people, and everyone is so deeply affected by the state of the country, and it's so hard to hold on to hope right now. But I hope, we can create meaningful conversation that can give people something new to believe in. So I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation. I look forward to sharing my little experiences, and hope it encourages people to also do better within their own capacity. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cindy. When you said that was flashy, I was trying to, someone once said that there's a difference between humility and humility. That humility is the senior brother of humility. I guess you're trying. That was actually genuine and sincere from the heart. Thank you so much for all you do to represent Nigeria. Thank you so much, especially for the younger generation. But talking about taking the conversation further, right? Let me ask you, right? When you think about Nigeria, what is the picture of the future that you see when you think about Nigeria? Is it something you can articulate?
When I think about Nigeria now, and because for me personally, I have But I have had the privilege of seeing, both sides cutting, and I've seen extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And what I think is the future, right, is is going to be very ugly, right? And a lot is going to happen, especially in the next couple of years. And there's going to be a lot of ugly things that need to happen, to really, really change things at the very fundamental level. But I think above that, I also understand the power that I have to change it. So it's such an interesting contradictory statement, because I think the future will be a bit ugly because we'll need to fight our way through all of this mess. But above all of that, I understand the power that I have to contribute to the change. Right. So I think Nigeria isn't a bad place, to be honest. But I think there's a future that is worth fighting for. Right. And I don't believe it's exactly rocket science. I think there's a future that is worth fighting for, because I work with children, and I see, in my work with them and in helping them build capacity, there's so much hope, and we cannot tell the children that there's no hope. And I think that is what the future of Nigeria represents, right? That we can build a world and define this moral compass, for the children. Maybe there isn't so much that we can do, right? So I think the future of Nigeria belongs to the young ones, and we cannot tell them there is no hope. So there's a responsibility that we fight the ugly fight that is needed, for that future to be realized. So yeah, that is how I understand things now. I think there's a lot of possibilities, but then there's a lot of ugliness that would need to happen to get us there.
Okay, Tunde, sorry. I'd like you to kind of drill a little deeper, right?
Okay.
How ugly is this fight?
Oh, it's ugly. it's I think it cuts across all stratas, even politically, um, even down to our very culture. I think there's a very perversive culture of like money worship, and I think a lot of that has eaten very deeply. It's a very low trust society. People can't trust one another, and I think there's no society that can grow when there's that trust gap. Right? We cannot collaborate to do meaningful work because some people have stoked hatred across tribal lines, right? So it's a lot of things, from a lot of the identity politics to even our values as a society, even across infrastructural level. I think there's a lot of opportunity to change stuff, and it isn't going to be a small change. And the thing about change is change can be very violent, right? And I'm not saying this in a way that maybe should be destructive, right? But changing something that has always been status quo, right, will be hard because a lot of the dysfunction we have now is by design. And you'd see that a lot of it serves the interest of a specific small group of people. To wrestle that out of their hands and change things fundamentally is going to be hard. So maybe that's the one way to look at it, right? That change is going to come, but somebody has to be tenacious enough, a group of people that really want to effect this change, and then the right amount of tenacity. There has to be a lot of will, and there has to be a lot of will to see this through to the very end. And maybe it's also important to see this that many people have tried in the past, and because it's so hard to like track like the level of change, yeah, because it takes so much time to begin to change things fundamentally. We think that the things that we do not really matter in the grand scheme of things, but I don't believe so. I believe change like that has to compound. It has to come from all the different channels, right? For people that are doing this, in education, for the different industries, in tech, at political leadership level, I think it has to be that collective effort that would compound and eventually snowball. There isn't going to be one single thing that just changes everything. It's impossible. So the fight has to be fought across all levels, and it is not going to be a pleasant one.
Thank you so much, Tunde. Thank you. So picking back to piggyback off that, right? You're talking about change, right? Most times we seem to get this attitude from Nigerians that Nigeria is everyone else's problem to solve, but mine. You know, what are your thoughts around this attitude? Did you get that?
I think, yeah, I did. I did. I think this mindset has led to a lot of complacency. And I think a lot of that reason is because many people have lost faith in their own ability to effect any change. That is why, and it boils down to what I said earlier, that we think the things that we do not matter in the grand scheme of things because we're not seeing like immediate change. I don't think that is how change happens. I think change takes a lot of time, especially one that is meaningful, right? It takes a lot of time and it's really investing in even in the future that we will not see, right? And maybe I'll talk a bit about the work I do with children, at Church in Slums Africa, right? It's the idea that, okay, we want to change something in a community. We've identified a problem that all 20 million children out of school, with no form of education whatsoever. And we see that a lot of them cannot fit into the conventional educational system anymore, right? And it's not even like a school problem. You can build schools and all of that, and there's no learning that happens there because there are no resource and also the quality of teachers, that is also another gap that we need to fill. So how do we provide an entry point for those children to be able to learn, right? Because I believe education, the very essence of it is the capacity for thought, for thinking, for independent thought, for problem solving. How do we create an entry point for these children that do not have that access to be within the four walls, to also have education and begin to build that capacity for thinking, right? And I thought, okay, I have this tool, chess, and I could teach it to the children. And that was the idea, right? Just a very simple entry point for them to start learning how to think for themselves, how to understand decisions, how to even understand complexity, and how to give them a way to see their own potential, right? And that is the greatest gift you can ever give them. And we started out, it was really difficult at first because the parents are like, Chess, how would I put food on the table? Like, how will you solve our problems? Because the immediate need for, most of this low income community, most of the slums that we started going to, is food, survival, right? So everyone wants something that would serve their immediate needs. But the vision I had was let us use chess as a way to help us build intellectual capacity. Because at the end of the day, their minds are their greatest asset. If you give them lunch today, maybe you distribute spaghetti, indomie, and you take pictures, the next day they're hungry again. So what do you do then? Right? It's not sustainable, right? The only way to empower people is to give them back their agency. And I thought if we could invest in the children, right, then we're investing in the future that even we will not be a part of. But when they will take those lessons, they will take that capacity and they will go on to build prosperity for themselves and their families. And that was the kind of thinking that enabled us push against the grain because we knew that what we were doing wasn't going to bring any instant gratification. It was going to be a long-term investment. You can empower an adult and you can walk away, but you cannot empower children and walk away, right? There has to be like consistent effort in ensuring that they have, the right skills and the right capacity to build the life that they want for themselves. And education being a core part of that. So it was let us use chess as a tool to give these children education, right? And a lot has happened in 6 years. And we've hit a lot of, milestones. We've also faced a lot of difficulty, right? But I have complete faith in what we're doing because over the last 7 years, it took time. I've literally seen the children go from 0 to point 1. I've seen them do a lot of things, but it took a lot of concerted effort over time. So I think, and to bring it back to the question, most people do not have that level of patience for change. Change is important. Change will come, but it will take time. It will take a lot of time. And another way to maybe understand it is to find a basis for empathy, right? And maybe I'll give another example. 3 years ago, I was driving I think from airport, I was driving home back to Yaba, and there was some traffic around that Oshodi on that bridge, right? So my car was just there, and a little kid just walked up to my window, right, and started begging for money. Now, for most people that drive in Lagos, we've probably experienced this at some point, right? And to me, the first thought was, of course, this is not my problem. And we there's this complacency, and we maybe at some point, from a place of pity and pity situation, we go, wow, these children should not be here. We recognize that there's a problem here. But then it's not my problem to solve, right? We could it could be the government, it could be like even at the family level, there's been some failure. Everything is still underpinned by poverty and lack of opportunity, right? But it's not my problem. That's not my child. And I also felt the same way, but I also felt bad for that child because I knew that, down to the very essence of what has happened in the child's story, it was because it was born probably in a different environment, or it was born to parents, that couldn't take care of him or her, right? And that could have been any of us. So the child is the real victim in this situation, right? He has become a victim of his parents' poverty, or he has become a victim of a dysfunctional society. So a good way to frame the problem isn't to say, well, it's not my child, it's not my problem. I think a way to understand it from empathy is this could have been me if I was born in the same situation in which this child was born into. And they call it the lottery of birth. And that gave me a much needed basis, for empathy to begin to see like what I could do about it, right? It wasn't my problem, but I had the power to change something, right? And the traffic cleared eventually, and I drove, but I couldn't stop thinking about that child, And when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking, and I thought to myself, I was going to go back there the next day to find that boy, And I went there the next day, and I went to that under bridge, the train tracks where a lot of the area boys and those homeless street kids convene. And I went there and I asked them that, oh, there was this boy. I didn't know his name, so I tried to describe, the facial feature. And they were not sure. So they called all the children together that were there, and there were about like 60 of them. Now, the area boys at first, they accosted me. They were like, oh, give us money, this, this. And I told him, oh, I don't have money. I was just looking for this kid, and I wanted to talk to him to see, what he needed and see if I could help in my own capacity. I wasn't a rich person or anything. And they understood that. So they brought all the kids, and I couldn't identify the boy anymore, right? But what happened on that day was I got to spend time with all of them. So I sat with them, and I started to talk to them. And the stories are very similar. 90% of them were there as a result of broken homes. Like I said, poverty underpins everything, but most of them, broken home. The mother died, then maybe the father remarried, and the stepmother was extremely cruel. It was a lot of similar stories, or for a lot of them too. The father died, then the mother died shortly after, and they took him to start living with his grandma in the village, and he wanted to come to Lagos to seek out new opportunity. And we forget that nobody ever becomes an area boy or a thug or a hoodlum as an adult, right? It starts insidiously from when they're children and they're neglected by society, right? And they grow and they grow. Then at some point, they lose that innocence. And after losing that innocence of being a child, because they need to survive on the streets. The streets is not for people that are soft-hearted. You need to use hard drugs. You need to fight. Sometimes you even need to kill, right, to show that you can survive here, because that is all you have. You have almost no place in society anymore, right? And we've been able to build a society that that has no space for people like that, because we judge them from afar, because we consider them a problem rather than seeing the opportunity to effect the kind of change that we want to see. And for me, it just started with a conversation, right? So that is maybe the next lesson out of this. From a distance, the problem might seem a bit too far off or another person's responsibility. But when we come a little closer to it, right, using empathy as a basis, oh, this could have been me. What if this was me? What if this was my child? What if this was my brother's child? And it gives us a new lens to view the problem. and more importantly, to help us learn, even the very little ways that we can contribute. And after the conversation with those kids, I now knew their story, right? And the beautiful thing about learning anyone's story is that you can learn to love them if you know their story, right? And there was a lot of um yeah, that conversation stayed with me. And I went back home and I thought, there's 60 of these boys. Most of them, hung up on drugs. What can I do? I'm just one person, right? Well, maybe I should just wait for the government to, but that will probably not happen, right? So what can I do? Chess. I know how to play chess. And I had an organization that was teaching chess to children in communities, but we had never done anything like this for homeless children. And it was, where would they sleep? Where would they stay? They sleep under the bridge and they live there. So I could go there and I could teach them chess there. And I told my team, we took a couple of chess boards and we went there. And for the next 7 months, we had Osho the under bridge. And for people that have followed the story over the years, you'd see miracles happen, right? In the 7 months that we were there teaching these kids, people traveled from all over the world. It became such a phenomenal success story that people came from all over the world. Patrice Evra, came to show the under bridge, the Canadian High Commissioner Embassy, CNN. They came to document the stories of these children, and even, celebrate their chess prowess. And that is how, by just having a conversation, right, and coming in close contact with the problem, we helped 60 children find their place in the world again. Some of them have gone on to, they're in school. One of them even built a website recently, amongst other things, and they're doing really well. And that was how that happened, from a place of, okay, this is not my problem, but at the same time, above that, I understand my power to effect some change, no matter how little it may be, right? And I believe it's important that we understand this power that we have. It would not be you to solve the problem, right? But it would be a starting point. Another reason is because of the magnitude and complexity of Nigeria's problem, right? We feel so jaded and helpless, right? And I'll tell this final story to wrap it up. It's a story I love to share about a little boy that was walking across the ocean. So the ocean had washed up millions of starfishes to shore, and he was picking the starfishes one by one. He would pick one and he would throw it back into the ocean. But it seemed like such a futile thing to do because there were millions of them. So a man that was standing in the distance, it was like, what are you doing? You will never be able to throw all of them back into the ocean. So it doesn't really matter. What you're doing doesn't matter. And the little boy just looked at him now and picked up another starfish and threw it into the ocean and said it would matter to this one. And he continued to do it. Right. So that is I think it's such an important example of not being too disillusioned or not accepting that because this is the magnitude of the problem, we cannot start with one. Every single change that has happened has compounded over time, right? Change starts with one. And if we understand that we can do for one, then it is enough. And if 10,000 other people see you doing for one, and they also decide to do for one, then we can begin to solve problems. And it will become a collaborative effort at some point with the private institutions and the government and other people that have the capacity to change at scale, right? But that empathy and that decision to do for one, right, is what would help us, change and solve problems. So yeah, those are just my thoughts and my examples and how I have been able to transition from, oh, this is not my problem, to also picking a mountain and getting involved. And that has, brought a lot of not just important attention to the problem, but it has also brought me a lot of success as well in helping others.
Wow, Tunde, thank you so much. That's quite a lot. We're going to go on a short break now, but before we go on the break, I'd like to kind of preempt the next question. I hear a lot of the things that you're doing, and I think it must have taken a lot of collaboration, right? So I'll just talk about the power of collaboration, right? At what point did you start to get support from other stakeholders? How many doors did you have to knock on? How did you deal with the rejection of your ideas? And what was that whole process? How do you go through that whole process? I hope you understand that, or just trying to seek support. All right, then. Thank you very much. We're going to go on a short break in a bit, and then we'll be back in 30 seconds. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Tunde. Thank you, everyone. If you're just joining us, warmly on behalf of the DoRight Awareness Initiative, I warmly welcome you again to this evening. Our initiative is a national movement that mobilizes like-minded Nigerians who understand the actual damage that lawlessness and moral decadence have done to our nation, and we understand the imperative of reversing this. We galvanize our people to join in the movement to initiate a rebirth, new mindset, where every Nigerian sincerely desires to do the right thing everywhere and every time. And our vision is to awaken and to entrench uprightness in Nigeria. Tonight, we are talking about the future we seek, the role of the citizen, and Tunde Omokoye has been immensely helpful to this conversation. So before we went on the break, Tunde has highlighted his journey, and through your journey, what I realized that you started with the power of one, but at some point you had to leverage the power of collaboration. And I know that process may have been painstaking, because something you said that is very instructive is that a lot of people are helpless, and we just don't want to. We just think that there's nothing we can do about it. But you started, but of course, you must have been lifted to you must have leveraged some other networks, resources to be able to achieve what you have at the moment. So tell us, what was the process like? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So collaboration. Someone once told me something, and he said, "See, Tunde, an idea is not complete until other people can find a place in it." And I didn't understand it back then because I had an idea, like I said, that chess could be an important intervention tool, to change lives. But a lot of people don't understand that because it seemed like such an elitist game, to a lot of people from a distance. Like, how would an elitist game be relevant to, poverty in any way? It didn't make sense to them. But I had a vision, and I had complete faith in this idea that, chess could help give children an intellectual identity, and that is really what they need. They need food for survival and all of that, but those are immediate needs. But something that would really help them on the long term and give back agency to them in a way that they can think for themselves and create prosperity for themselves in their own communities is to invest in their minds. And chess was the perfect tool to help engage these children and empower them with the right skills. We all know, like, the only reason why most of us are here and we have certain opportunities, the education that we have, the exposure that we have, the book we've read, and the opportunities that have been availed us, because of all those things. So somebody has to stand in the gap, right? So that was what I understood, that my role was to stand in that gap, by giving them this simple entry point, right? But I didn't know what the bigger picture was. I didn't know how it was eventually going to put food on their table. And this is the right kind of thinking that you need, that you have an idea, but you also understand that like there has to be a very holistic approach to it, which you would never be able to do, in isolation, individually, right? So you have to understand that and seek out the kind of collaborations that align with the vision that you have. This is important, right? The first thing is to understand. What I did was to understand the opportunities that existed in that ecosystem, within the problem I was trying to solve, right? The problem was a huge one. There are 20 million children out of school, right? And we want to solve that problem by giving them an entry point into education using chess. Now, I don't have a school, or I don't have the capacity to build a school. So the first thing was to start reaching out to schools within the community that this is what we want to do. We want you to take up some of these kids, right? And we'll pay that tuition to you, but you have to give us a discount, right? So it came with collaborations first with educational institutions. So while we're creating a community of learners, in some of the worst slums, while we're giving them a way to develop the love for learning by teaching them chess, by helping them learn all these valuable life skills, right? We should also find a way to channel that into formal education for them. So we started to do that. It became, one way for us to work with other people to ensure that the impact is holistic and it's complete. Then the second thing, which a lot of people get to realize with time, it's easy to have a great idea, but if you want to change the world, somebody has to pay for it, right? And this was an immediate limitation that I understood. I had an idea, I had a skill, I had this talent, but I didn't have any money, right? But there are people that have the resource, right? Now, how do you communicate the value of what you're trying to do to them so they can invest in it, right? So it's two things, right? The first thing is you need to start with what you have, right? It is easier to ask people for help when you have something going on, right? And let me frame it this way. Instead of saying, oh, help me, I want to do this, right? A different way to frame it would be, oh, I'm already doing this, and this is what I have started. Now I need this to do more. So framing it that way gives people a way to understand that you've made you've made the first sacrifice for this thing that you believe in, right? Because it was hard. We're not selling a product or anything. We're selling a vision that children can have the capacity to be intellectually inclined, that chess can change lives, that chess can give them an identity, and chess can empower them. Not a lot of people would understand that or want to participate in it, because it's going to offer them anything, right? But being able to communicate that value by showing that you have given yourself to the work, helped a lot of people believe in the vision. Like if Tunde goes to this place every Saturday and Sunday and is investing this much time, then this is worthwhile, right? So that helped us start getting believers. And it was very hard at first again, but I started really using social media. And this is where the power of storytelling really, really came in, right? Before Chess and Slums, I'd never really written anything. I never considered myself a writer of any sort. But it became a need because by spending time with the children, there were a lot of new experiences I was having. And it was giving me a new way to understand poverty. Like we had always defined poverty as, maybe the West likes to define it as living below the $2 line daily. But I started to see that this was not even the case, right? Like poverty at that level was people being completely removed from systems, the rule of law, education. And because they have no way to access this opportunity, it's hard to break out of that cycle, right? So being able to communicate that in a way that doesn't demean the people who are serving, right? In a way that doesn't say, see, these people are suffering, they can't have 200 naira daily. The framing of the story was, look at the situation. But despite all of this, these children are showing great aptitude for chess, right? So it's instead shining the spotlight on the potential that they have, the abilities that they have, rather than, the so much focus on the poverty and the lack and that visual representation of a child maybe that is malnourished. People do that to evoke pity, but that is not the right way to pursue like interest. That is not the right way to bring attention to the work that you do. That is not the right way to pursue partnership. You don't have to demean the people you are advocating for or serving, to score pity points to be able to get the resource or the partners, to fund it or believe it. There's a way that dignifies them, that is equally powerful and effective, that people become believers because they see that, oh, this child, this person, this situation has the potential to become so much more. So being able to do that using social media started to attract the right people, right? And it started to give us more resource. We started from Ikorodu, then we were able to go to Makoko, and we're going to go to Ocean, and now we're in 30 countries in Africa, right? And the beauty of it is don't even spend too much time seeking out partnerships or chasing people. I think if you do truly meaningful work, you're going to attract, the kind of people that need to contribute to the vision. And remember, I said earlier that an idea isn't complete until other people can find a place in it, right? But one thing was I was able to effectively tell the stories of what we did. And that resonated with people because it was from a place of true empathy. It wasn't from a place of like seeking pity or trying to diminish who we're serving. Let us do something beautiful, something that highlights the strength. And that is why I always wear a cap. And you see me wearing this. It's not because it's a fashion statement, right? I'll tell you why that happened and why that was the defining point, for us. And that was what connected us to all the different partners that we needed and all the different people that we needed to be a part of the idea to make it complete. When we did the Oshodi on Bridge project, we had taught the children and we wanted to do a tournament to showcase the talent, to see, how far they had come from being streets, homeless kids, using drugs and doing all sorts of things, committing crimes under the bridge, to being refined thinkers, that were now very inclined to change, that were now looking for more positive ways to express themselves rather than violence, that now wanted to learn, that now wanted opportunity, that now had hope, for themselves. So we had trained them and wanted to do a tournament. So on the day of the tournament, we thought, these kids are always wearing tattered clothes. What can we do so people see them differently? Because we don't want to feed into that same narrative of, poor African child. And we decided to make native attires for them like this one, and it was a lot of money because there were like 50 of them. So we made native attires for all of them. And we're like, okay, how do we complete this? So it also like captures the essence of our culture. Let us put a filler there. And we gave them the filler, and I remember that day on the tournament day. So because the kids they don't bathe. Prior to that time, they wouldn't bathe. They would just, loiter around. So we went and ensured that they showered and they dressed up. And as they were coming out of the car park and they were walking to Oshodi Under Bridge to sit down, for the tournament, the entire market just came to a halt. Even the cars that were passing on the road had to stop. The market women couldn't believe that these were the same children that they had always seen for the last couple of years, in tattered clothes. They were completely dignified. And these kids, for the first time, we saw them. We saw them not because of the situation which they were in, but we saw them for what they can truly become. We saw that they can look like us, right? And they were so decently dressed, they looked really nice, really fly. And it was such a beautiful moment. I think that captured the very essence of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to show the world that, see, Nigeria has this problem quite all right. And these children, we see them, we fear them, they walk up to our cars in traffic. But do we really see them? We don't really see them. We only picture them from a distance. But now we see them because they can look like us. And when we understand that, we know that the only difference here is opportunity. Talent is universal, but that opportunity isn't. So that was the defining moment for Chess and Slums. And being able to see that, through chess, we've been able to not just dignify their stories, right, but to create a new world where they could actually, make something of themselves, where they could realize their own potential, just using a simple chess game. It was a very viral thing. And the way I framed it when I put up that post was, we are all area boys, right? For every single one of us, the area boy thing that used to be derogatory, it is important that we embrace that word for the sake of these children, because to a degree, we're all victims of a dysfunctional society. And people felt that. People really, really felt that. And seeing even the visual representation of the children on that day, the post went viral all over the world. People all over the world saw it, and they were deeply inspired by the stories of these boys. And it brought in the right people. We needed a partner to provide accommodation for the children so they don't live under the bridge again. So we partnered with those ones. We partnered with kids that code because they were like, oh, if these children could learn chess and be so good at it, then maybe they could learn coding. And I tell you, in 3 months of just training them, they were able to build their own e-commerce website. These were children that, could barely speak English when we started, right? And a lot of this happened, right? And it brought in all the right people that we needed because everyone was inspired, by that single entry point through chess, and it blossomed into everything else, right? And to bring it back to the question, Collaboration is important, right? You cannot effect change, in isolation. It is not possible. But then the responsibility that you have is to have complete faith in your own idea first before anything else and anyone else. Don't seek out collaborations immediately without having proof of concept. So having proof of concept is defying all odds and saying, my idea can change the world. And I'm going to show you how it will change the world. And at that point, you now understand your place in it. And that is how, you build anything meaningful. And I've said this that, it is possible to do great things from a small place. But I think even more recently, I'm starting to learn that great things almost certainly only happen from small places. So the small place is you starting out alone, but eventually being able to articulate that vision to other people, so they can see and understand the value, right, enough to be a part of it. So that is how like we have thought about collaborations over time. And now we have global partners all over the world, the ones that pay for it, through resource, the volunteers that give their time and pour their hearts into this, the people on social media that help us like push out the word and continue to give our work visibility. Everyone has a role to play. Even the government who has reached out and also collaborating on a project, to scale up. So there's always a place for everyone eventually, but you must ensure that the vision remains, a focal point.
Thank you so much, Tunde. Thank you. So I have quite a lot of questions for you, some coming from the audience, but in 1 minute, I have a question from Blaze. So he wants to know if you're looking forward to reaching out to states in the east and northern part of Nigeria. He actually acknowledges that your task is enormous, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Blaze. So I'm currently in New York. I got in 5 days ago, but last week I was in my degree for a couple of days, and I spent a lot of time at two IDP camps, and it's just really heartbreaking now that I saw in the news 2 days ago that the first IDP camp, was affected by the flooding situation, and a lot of people, were really affected. That really broke my heart, and I've been trying to see what we can do, to find the right support for them. Um, yes, the vision, like I said, is to reach 1 million children across Africa. We're already in about 30 countries now, and I think our next project, actually for next year, maybe Q1 next year, is to go to northern Nigeria. I already started with my degree, Borno State. We're partnering with the NAFOM Chess Club. So the Nigerian Air Force, they started a chess club about a year ago because, again, they were inspired by the work that we were doing. And they started a chess club and they reached out to me. And that is like the power of collaboration, like I said. To me, going to my degree on my own, I'm a stranger to the situation there. But they already, like, they're there on ground. And just being able to just integrate myself into what they already have allows us to have, a meaningful collaborative effort. Right. So I was there, the Air Force, they invited me. I went there, I went to the IDP camps. We gave out a lot of chess sets. I spoke to the instructors that I've been working with the children. I also had a training session with the kids as well. Right. So I think that is just the beginning of the revolution. And I'll tell you an experience I had, especially when I was in the second IDP camp. There was a particular kid there called Ali Mustafa. And I was playing with him, and this boy had only been learning chess for like a week, prior to my visit. And the first 15 moves of the game, he played a very complex theoretical opening. And I couldn't believe that for an absolute beginner like that he could that I could have that level of understanding of complexity enough to like play and last, that move sequence. Now, I've taught chess all over the world. I'm currently in New York. I was at the Marshall Chess Club where some of the brightest geniuses, math geniuses, they come there to the Marshall Club to play. And I can tell you that I've never seen anyone learn with such level of skill and pace as that boy, in an ITP camp that whose family was displaced, by Boko Haram with no education, that barely speaks any English, right? And to me, it just begs the question, like, how many more of the children like this are we losing to to not caring enough. How many more of them are we losing? I think every single child is worth investing in. Every single child can be a genius if you give them the right kind of opportunity, right? So it was a moment that really stayed with me, right? So right now we're putting together the modalities, for a northern expansion, from Adamawa to Gombe State. Of course, we're already in Maiduguri, right? There's a lot of complexity because, like I said, it's trust that we're offering. And it's not something a lot of people understand because there's no instant gratification, right? But we've been speaking to the elders of the community, the parents, they've been very receptive. And currently the kids are playing, they're learning, right? And they're learning, they're really learning. Then at some point it expands a bit further where we find the right partners, introduce basic literacy and numeracy. And if we continue to do this, like I said earlier, that kind of progress compounds, right? So definitely the vision is to do that, starting with Northern Nigeria. We've done a project, in Cross River, we have a project in Ibadan, in Lagos, of course, and we're still just expanding. It takes a lot of effort to put a program together, but and it will take time, right? But until we reach 1 million children, I don't think, yeah, the vision is to reach 1 million children, and until we do that, our work is not done. So it's still in the works. And if there's any way to also collaborate, please reach out as well. Be happy to.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for your time. So we have another question from Omoto Shaw Temitope, although I'm going to modify that slightly because I have another question along those lines. So what she wants to know is what has been the most rewarding part of your journey in this whole experience, right? But I would also like to know what has also been like the most so for her, it's what has been the most rewarding moment in your journey in helping those kids go through this. But for me, I also want to know what has been like your most what has like the greatest challenge or the most discouraging moment or like the most flat out moment that you had in all this journey. Now we're running out of time, so and we seem to have quite a lot of questions. So yeah. But those two questions. And then after you answer them, we'll go on another break. Thank you very much.
Most rewarding. Wow. So there's been a lot of moments, and it's always going to be like the very highs and lows, right? So both of them kind of like complement each other. Like the highs remind you why this work is important, and the lows, also sometimes can be like a jarring reminder, like the level of complexity you're dealing with, and why you should never take even the little things for granted. I think I've had a lot of rewarding moments. Um, Especially like for the individual stories of the children. Children like Ferdinand, in Marco that was living with cerebral palsy, then became a chess champion. Then his story went viral, and now we'll be traveling to the US next year with 10 other children in our program. So there's been a lot of like specific moments like that. Well, the individual stories of the children, and because I had something to do with it, it changed their life, like their lives forever. Like Fawaz, the boy from Oshobi on that bridge, that went on to win the tournament, and that changed his life forever. And so that for me is real fulfillment, right? But I think on a much broader scale is just understanding that um, I got to be a part of the solution. And I don't think we understand how deeply meaningful this is. Right. Someone was asking me recently that Tunde, sure you are going to Jackpot, and I was just laughing because why do I need to Jackpot? Like literally, I will never be happy anywhere else in the world. I will never. I have been traveling quite a bit, because my work has really moved from execution on field to ensuring that we're able to raise the resource and find the right kind of partners to drive the work at scale. But then home for me would always be a place where I can do the work, which is my life's work, right? And there's a lot of problems, but somebody has to stay with the sinking ship, right? And it's a very deeply, deeply fulfilling, work because it's purpose. It's something that you're putting back into the world with the skill that you have. And I think anyone else can get to experience this in their lifetime. It doesn't have to be money or having a lot of financial success. It's whatever you have in your hands. For me, it's chess. For you, it can even be your gift of eloquence. It could be being able to write, being able to take good pictures. Everyone can change something. And the reward in that is seeing that because you had something to do with it, right? That you've affected a situation positively, right? And that's a life right there. And maybe you will never get to know now, but in a couple of years, that person will never be able to tell their story without highlighting, where you were involved, in whatever capacity that is. I think for me, it's something I would always hold on to, that I was a part of their story by just giving them an opportunity to learn, right? It has blossomed into this, groundbreaking idea that is changing the world. But really, down to just that very one child is ensuring that because I have something to do with it, that they can find their place in the world again. Recently, one of the girls that we sponsor, we have in scholarship support, she graduated from primary school. And I remember when I met her 6 years ago, she had never been to school. They lived in extreme poverty. And because, we started teaching her chess and one of our sponsors, decided to pay for her tuition, she's very well on her way to realizing her dream of being a medical doctor. And she's doing so well in school. And if I wasn't there at the time, but I had something to do with it. And now she's very well on her way, to living a life, that she desires. So I think for me, that is the greatest reward out of this. It's validated in seeing the children go from 0 to 1, in seeing them, go from being completely neglected and forgotten in their communities, right, to showing great aptitude and capacity for chess, for being like intellectually inclined, for eventually having access to education. And that would be an investment in their future that nobody can ever take away from them. And I say this because it's the same benefit we all have. So there has to be a future that includes all of them. Now, for the challenge, so we've had a lot of like difficulty. Maybe now things are a lot easier because it is now a popular project. But at the beginning, I remember it was like having to deal with the parents and having to convince the parents because their parents would rather want the kids to maybe do menial jobs to support them rather than have them come sit and learn or whatever or go to school, right? So it was very challenging trying to communicate the value of education and learning to the parents. But it became easier with time when we started maybe providing incentives. So we'll be like, oh, when you come to chess training today, we'll give you gala. And because of the extremity of like poverty in some of the communities, that may just very well be the only meal that a child would have. So being able to tie it to, oh, we'll give you lunch after the training, there was like an influx of children, but eventually, they stayed because of the chess, and it has a way of drawing you into it. And the parents started seeing, the value of that even in their character and even in their behavior at home and ultimately in their academic outcomes, right? So, and, when they also go out for tournaments and they win trophies or they win money, it becomes a thing of pride to not just the parents, but the community as well. So those success stories have made things easier over time.
Thank
Then maybe another real challenge is resource, because, like I said, it's easy to empower an adult and walk away. But for children, you cannot walk away. So there would always be like a plan to continue to sustain over time, and you always have to factor that in, and that would always consume a lot of resource, and that's hard. It's hard to define an exit point, but through the different iterations of doing it, I think you come to a point where you know that you've done enough.
you. I think we have lost him somewhere. Sorry, please, while we're trying to get him back, we'll just try to go on another break. I don't know if we can have the DoRight video playing. Thank you very much. All right, today you're back.
Yeah, sorry. I think
Thank you very much. Sorry, thank you very much. If you're just joining us, for the very first time, you are on to the monthly webinar of the DoRight awareness initiative. The DoRight Awareness Initiative is a national movement that mobilizes like-minded Nigerians who understand the actual damage that lawlessness and moral decadence have done to our nation and the imperative of reversing this. We try to do this by developing a movement that initiates a rebirth, new mindsets where every Nigerian sincerely desires to do right every time and everywhere. And like I've said over this call, our vision is to reawaken and entrench uprightness in Nigeria through the entrenchment of our values of integrity, diligence, respect, compassion, justice, courage, and meritocracy. Today, we are on the topic of the future we seek, the role of the citizen, and Tunde Omokoye has been immensely impactful in the conversations that we have had. So I'd like to start from where you stopped, talking about poverty, from the children. I talk about the poverty, the poor state, the poor state of the children that you're trying to help out, right? Reading through your own background, it seemed like your background is also, there's a bit of semblance with poverty from what you said, yeah? So the question I want to ask is, so what motivated you, right? Considering your background, what motivated you to choose impact over profit? And how do you encourage younger people, from I hate to use the word poor background, but that is what it is. Right? Programs to also aspire, to look for impact over income. So we're running out of time, so we'll have to contain because there seems to be quite a lot more questions from even the audience. Thank you very much. But did you understand the question?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think my own background, because I also grew up in the corridor, and we grew up in an extremely difficult situation as well. In fact, at primary school, I had to drop out of school for like 2 years because there was no money, and I had to help my mom walk and sell fruits and sometimes even water on the streets just to make ends meet. And but at some point I was able to go back to school, and it was in that time I discovered chess. Now, a lot of my own personal experiences, like growing up, and like I said, I've been privileged to, see both sides of the curtain. I've been extreme wealth, and I've been in a lot of circles where, people wear like $5 million wristwatches, and I've also seen extreme poverty, where people can afford like 1,000 naira to get medication for their children, and I've seen people die even because they couldn't afford some basic healthcare. So I've seen both extremities, and it sometimes makes me wonder that how did we design a society that is so unequal? And it is that curiosity that has led me on this path, right? Because this inequality shouldn't exist in society. Like, we design money, we design everything. So how do we design society in a way that there's this huge gap between the haves and have-nots? And it's something I've always been deeply curious about, even as a child, especially when you go to bed hungry, and I would just wonder that, why, why should this be the case? And I think a lot of that has come from being inclined to solve a problem that on a deeply personal level. And this is why I say this, that at the intersection of a personal pain that you have, or a privilege that you have, and another person's oppression, this is where we find, true, meaningful ways to effect change. It has to cross at that level. Maybe you've had some privilege of, you went to a really good school, you had really great education. Guess what? 20 million children will never have don't have that opportunity right now, right? So what are you going to do about it? To be a conduit and pay it forward. These are the things you need to be more curious about, right? For me, it wasn't like the intersection of my privilege with another person's lack of opportunity. It was my pain, my background, and embracing it. And if you're listening to this and maybe you have a similar story of coming from nothing, right? You must lean into it, right? You must not try to forget it or not regard it as a part of your story. You must embrace that story, because that story, is the reason you find purpose And that purpose has to be channeled into being who you needed for someone else. So I always had that mindset that I would always be who I needed, when I was younger to someone else, because I understand the real consequence of poverty. The real consequence of poverty is not that you don't have money or you live below $2, is that you never get a chance to realize your own potential. I think that is the greatest tragedy of poverty. Right? And it's even the greatest tragedy of maybe Nigeria. And they say Nigeria has a lot of potential. But potential is nothing if it's not realized. And it's just coming to that place of understanding that if I could use this talent that I had and I could give it to someone else, it becomes a gift to them. Right. So you can understand how something that serves just your own interest, by the time you decide to share it with someone else, it becomes something that has purpose, that has meaning behind it. It becomes a gift, right? And this is how you create impact, right? By leveraging the skills that you have and contributing it to the life of another person. Because by doing that, you deposited the best part of yourself, of your identity with them. And that would also help them, build a life for themselves and do it for another person. And that is how we've enjoyed any of this progress. Like civilization as we know it is because somebody had an idea or had a specific talent or skill and decided to share it with the world, right? From the Albert Einsteins to Isaac Newtons to every single person that has built the world as we know it, to Steve Jobs, who built, personal computers and the iPhone. It was because he had an idea and he had certain skills to bring that idea to life and he decided to share it with the world, right? So as a young person, this has to be like our compass, not just to make income. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should go and start a non-profit or start a charity. That is not the way to impact the world. That is not the way to change the world. You can't build a business, that can make money, right? Because the moment you start to offer value to people, you will make money. You make money. There's no question, right? But it's being mindful enough that whatever it is you're making, there has to be a way for it to impact society positively. Then you get to decide what that is, right? But you must always have that mindset at the back of your mind, not just because it would affect society or benefit society, but because that is the greatest way to reach personal fulfillment. The pursuit of money, all of it is vain, all of it is empty, right? And especially in the context of our own situation, of our own country, of our own society, everyone needs to become a conduit for the other person. Whatever privilege that we have, whatever pain that we've been through, we must channel that in a way that can give other people a sense of belonging, that can give them a place. And that has always been my own mindset. And I know that the only reason why I'm able to do this and do it tenaciously is because I know the pain of poverty. I've seen how destructive it can be. And I want to just do my own part to ensure that we can save as many children as possible from that vicious cycle, right? It has started with chess, but eventually it can become anything else, right? And if you also come from a small place like me, you have to believe that great things can happen from that small place, right? You have to believe it. It is important that you know this. And while you're building a life for yourself, right, that you have a sense of duty back to your own community. And maybe this is why all of this can make sense that I come from this place. Now I'm going back to give back to that same place. And now I have a vision of giving a million children that gift of chess, the gift of education, the gift of critical thinking to become independent thinkers. Because when they come out of the slums and use this opportunity to create prosperity, they would always have a sense of duty, back to the same communities that they're from. And this is the leadership that we need in Nigeria, not people that have no context or no empathy for for poverty or people that come from the lower class, but people that have felt the problem very deeply, that have lived it, right? And they understand what they need to do to effect that change, to their communities. So I'd say don't give up. Understand the power that you have to change the trajectory of things. Invest into yourself, invest in building capacity. Because when you do that and you become world class at it, whatever you go in the world, it becomes undeniable. And when you get to that point, you must understand that the only use for that skill, for that resource, for that privilege, or for that pain is to help other people find, their place in the world as well.
Thank you very much, Tunde. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you two questions two very related questions. Number one is that in your work, especially with the education sector in Nigeria as at today, Are there any opportunities that you see for nation building that you want to highlight, that you want to share with us? And secondly, for passionate Nigerians that are on this call, how can they partner with you in the work that you do? Can I go over
Yeah.
that?
So
Do you need me to go over that?
yeah, please.
Okay,
Opportunities
so the
for
first,
impact. Abi?
yeah,
Okay.
so opportunities for impact, especially in the education space as we speak today, because at the DoRight
Okay.
Initiative, we also are heavily invested in the education
Yeah.
sector, right? And
Yeah.
then secondly is, sorry, the second question is for people on this call that are just passionate about seeing a new Nigeria, right? And how can they partner with you in the work that you do?
Okay. All right. So opportunities for impact in the educational sector. I think, especially for my travels, I've come to learn that like our understanding of like education has to be different, right? Not everyone is going to fit into the conventional educational system as we know it anymore. I think in a couple of years it will become um, inconsequential whether you went to university or you have a certificate. I think it's going to be purely like a skill-based economy. So I was watching a video recently where Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, he was talking about like China and how they make their phones in China. And they asked him why. Why is he not making it in America? And you know what he said? He said there's a specific kind of tooling, engineering that they need to build the iPhone. In America, you can fill a room with those people that have that skill, the engineering skill that is needed. You can only fill maybe about a room in America. But if you go to China, you can fill 6 stadiums, with engineers that have that specific skill, for the tooling of the iPhone. And you begin to wonder, like, how did they, like, at that vocational level of education, what did they do differently to ensure that, they can tap into like their human capital to build specific skill sets that has global value? It's because they prioritize vocational learning. We need to change our mindset towards education. Education, one, has to serve the needs of our community, first of all. And the second thing is to serve the needs of the world. What's like, we can see that there's a shift happening right now globally, right? A lot of things that mostly technologically driven, right? But the problem, is that there's a lot of missing infrastructure that can help in aiding that development in our educational sector. Where are the vocational schools? We need so much more of them. We need to empower people with the right skills. We cannot just cram everybody into the same learning institutions where they're not learning anything that is relevant to the world that is rapidly evolving. And that is why, like, for example, our own approach to using chess is ensuring that we can build skill, right? That we can build intellectual capacity where they can learn complexity, they can learn problem solving, creativity. All of these skills will be needed for the future of work. It won't be whether you have a certificate or you went finished from this university anymore. I think that is such a huge opportunity in harnessing our human capital in Nigeria. If there are 20 million children out of school and we have a population of over 200 million people, in the next 50 years, Nigeria will have the youngest youth population in the world, right? And if we do not empower them with the right skills, if we don't follow the direction of the future, all of this will become a liability to the future, right? So we have a chance to decide that do we build this human capital potential that we have into assets, or will they become a liability to us? And that liability will begin to reflect in every sphere, even politically, that we see, young people that should be doing something meaningful, that are being used as tools by maybe politicians, to disrupt elections, or whatever it is. We begin to see those things begin to fester in every single facet of our society. So we need to make a decision now that there can be another way to educate people. There can be another way to invest, in their minds. And that way isn't just conventional vocational go to school. We need to bring back the vocational training, and we need to do that very urgently. There has to be concerted effort to ensure that this large population that we have, we're already doing that in our capacity. Like I said, We started with chess. Some of the children were picked up from the bridge on the street. They're now in furniture school. They're learning how to make world-class furniture. Some of them are learning, how to build software. So in those different channels, and they're not. It's not. I mean, a child that you picked up on the street when he was 15, and maybe he dropped out of school in primary one. Do you want to take him back to primary one? So how do you define a pathway towards education for them? So that education has to be defined in a way that that child or that person, can build skill, can build capacity, and build it in a way that is relevant both to our society and even on a broader scale, to the global economy. If we start to do that, if we start to understand that our greatest resource isn't in the oil that we have, but it's in our people, then we can do something fundamentally correct, right? I think that is such a huge opportunity for us in that sector that maybe we're not really thinking about properly yet. But I think we should start taking deliberate efforts, to harnessing, our human capital like that and training people at vocational level. Um, the second question now, sorry, could
So
you?
the second question is how can people on this call
Okay.
that are passionate about what you do, how can they partner with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if they want to donate, how do they donate?
Yeah, well, you can follow any of our social media pages, Instagram. If you want to donate, you can definitely donate to our cause. The only reason why we're able to do the things that we do is because people believe in our vision and they invest in it. I don't even consider it just like a donation to charity. I think what we're doing is so much more than just a charitable effort. I think it's the greatest kind of invention, greatest kind of investment rather into a future that can include all of us. Right, being able to invest in the lives of the children, even though we are not going to directly benefit from it, but we know that this is how we build prosperity. That we have so much, we can trickle out some of those resources, even if it's time that you have to volunteer, even if it's whatever capacity, that we understand that the little that we contribute, and the little that another person contributes, it compounds and it grows, and eventually, it can blossom and it can snowball into something that would affect change at the level at which we want it. So you can volunteer with us as well. We have a lot of volunteers across the continent. Whatever skill that you have, whatever capacity, there are a lot of moving parts. We don't just do chess, so it doesn't have to be chess. You can We have like a team of people that do graphics, a team of writers, finance, fundraising. There are a lot of moving parts. So if you think you can contribute in any of that capacity, please reach out, send an email. You can also donate to our cause. The account details are there on our social media channels. And more importantly, spread the word. And even if it doesn't have to be within organized work like ours, in your own community, if there's a need, if there's a gap you think you can fill, to solve a problem, within your capacity, please do it. Collaborate with other charitable organizations that are doing the work. Give your time, give your efforts. Every single one of us must give back in some way. We cannot build a society if that doesn't happen. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold our leaders accountable. But I think everyone has a role to play. Continue to call them out, continue to do all of that. But please, in your own capacity as well, please contribute. And this is how we build a truly prosperous nation.
Thank you very much, Tunde. That's You're speaking to over 3,000 people listening on YouTube and Facebook. So I want to believe that we're sending a message to a very good audience. That can, like I said, I think that collaboration of micro efforts that can
Yeah.
deliver massively impactful solution is actually like the pathway to seeing the Nigeria or the future or the new Nigeria that we dream about. Thank you so much, Tunde. Like I've said before, if you have joined us for the first time, I warmly again welcome you on behalf of the DoRight Awareness Initiative. If you really want to know more about us, please do well to visit our website on DoRight.ng. DoRight.ng. We have initiatives like the DoRight After School Club that is already in the works, and we're also doing quite a lot of work in the education space. In the education space, like I already mentioned, we are just a group. We're a secular, non-partisan movement of people that are just passionate about rewriting the story of Nigeria, creating like a rebirth, helping new mindset, and just instilling the values that we believe are very potent to the birth of a new Nigeria. So once again, if you're on the call, thank you very much. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to get personal in a bit. So I have a few questions because our time is very limited now. I'm going to get a bit personal with you in a bit, but just for 5 minutes, can you quickly just answer some of these questions that I have from the audience? Omoto Shotemitope wants to know what does the future look like for the children you work with, both in chess and in their personal development? I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can take the second question alongside. So the second question is from Prince Kelvin Eze. Says, what is the vision for tracking their success stories, both in chess and personal growth? Do you understand?
Yeah, for sure. I think the questions are a bit similar.
They're very similar, yes. That's what I'm taking them together.
So I love to say this, that chess is not the end in itself. It's both, it's really a means to several ends, right? And that is why I say that chess is the entry point, right? And we can now like define pipelines into very specific things like mentorship, technology, then access to education, right? And maybe some skill acquisition as well. So we have a lot of partners in those different capacities. So we bring an entry point that is low cost, very low entry barrier, right, to communities, to impoverished communities. And we use that to build a community of learners. You engage their minds, then you can now channel it into those different pipelines. Now, what does the future look like for the children that we work with in chess and the personal development, right? Like I said, we have a vision to reach 1 million children. And I think if we can do that, then we can reach some sort of critical mass where we have 1 million children who are intellectually empowered, from poverty, from some of the worst slums across Africa, who have that sense of like identity and who are able to learn valuable skills that will help them, in their own lives and in their own communities as well. So this is like our approach to like impact, that we're able to create a community of learners. So we have different ways of like engaging them and measuring impact over time. That the qualitative ways in which, like in the lessons that we teach, the progress, tournaments. So we track all of that, both progress at the level of skill for chess in itself. Some of our kids have won both national and international tournaments, and the ones that are on scholarship support. We have over 1,000 children on scholarship support, tracking their academic performances and how even chess aids the academic outcomes. In countries like Armenia, China, they're already adopting chess as a part of their curriculum, because it provides an opportunity for this, gamified learning approach where children can participate in their own learning in a very practical way, right? And I think that is the best thing you can do to empower someone, to show them, their own, potential, right? And that is how we like to think of it. Like we're using chess to empower their minds and also track like outcomes at academic level, then also scholarships. So we have like scholarship support programs for the learners in our community. And what this does is it also promotes learning in these places. Because when you go to a place where education is undervalued, for example, now when we went to Makoko and we trained about like 100 children, like half of them had never been to school before because the parents would rather, want the kids to be fishermen. But now they're all on scholarship, they're learning, they're in school, they're doing well now, right? It's also built that community of learners using chess, again, as an entry point. And at the same time, now supporting the education, formally, right? So I think, like I said, it's an investment into building prosperity. Africa, Nigeria needs stronger minds. They need problem solvers and it needs leaders. And it has to emerge from the same communities that they must lead. There's no magic to it. Nobody's coming from above to save us. The leaders that must lead Nigeria and solve our problems must emerge from the same communities that they must lead. I think this is how we're raising stronger citizens, stronger children, that have, the right level of education, that had the right level of empowerment, the right level of critical capacity to think through our problems. That is what we need. We need people with that level of 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 um, of staying power with the problem. And I think chess is such an amazing way, to leave that mindset with the children. So we have developed curriculums that help us. Then when we do that, we now track some of our learners to mentors. So we also have a mentorship program. So if you like in whatever career path that you are, I'm sure we have a child, that also has dreams, to do that. So we have events where we bring the children together with these people. We have Chess Without Borders. We bring doctors in. The children want to become doctors, but they've never seen one before. So they play chess together, then they have a relationship, right? So the future really is to reach 1 million children. And if we can give them this gift of chess, then I think we can effect change in a way um, that is meaningful, all right, at a mindset level. That is what we need. We need that shift in mindset, right? And it's also important to define an exit point. Our program runs for a year in every community. Then we now have like a way to continue to engage them in tournaments. Then for the scholarship support, it runs for the entire duration, whether they're in primary school or they're in secondary school or they're at university level. So our sponsors understand that commitment. They will also have a fund, that helps us continue to like support the education, even when the sponsors discontinue, their support over time. So this is what our model really looks like, and this is how we continue to track the progress of the children over time, and ultimately ensure that they can continue to learn within their communities, engage the members of the community as trainers, train them so they can continue to do the work themselves, and also partner with other organizations that already have like a system in place. And also at secondary school, public school level, we're trying to get chess into the curriculum to ensure that children can continue to reap the benefits of that. China is already doing this, Armenia is already doing this, and there's a clear difference in the educational outcomes. So this is the vision for it anyway at scale.
Thank you very much, Tunde. So I don't know if I really want you. So I was going to ask about your cap, anyways, and then you have actually said you have actually. I mean, up until this moment, I thought it was just for brand identity and promoting
No,
your content. But thank you for telling us the deeper the story and the deeper meaning. But I don't know if I really know how I want you to answer this question, though. But I've listened to you, right? And one of the things that one of the biggest lessons I've learned from you today, or one of the biggest discoveries I've made about your person today, is empathy. This insane amount of inexhaustive empathy, right, is what is a theme that is actually resonating with me right now. I know a bit of your story. I mean, we belong to the same business club, and I know when you went through your medical challenge, and it was a really, really tough time, right? For you, it was a really, really brutal surgery, for lack of a better word. So, in the midst of your pain, right? Because I know it was a painful experience, to the best of my knowledge. How are you able to find your rhythm to be empathetic towards your cause? Do you understand what I'm saying? How do you look beyond your pain? How do you look beyond your pain to still pursue something that is bigger than you?
All right.
So you have 2 minutes because we're rounding up, please. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I'll tell the story. So because stories help us understand reason, right? Because I could tell you that, it's because, I'm passionate and I'm just very locked in and I don't know how else to live without giving a bit of my life to the work that I care about. And that is true as well. I think there's no life worth living if you can give, all of yourself to something that you care deeply about. I think not a lot of people will get to experience that level of fulfillment or that level of love for something that means so much to them. I feel that way very strongly about using, my talent as a way to really impact the world. But I'll tell you a story. And this is one of the most important stories, and I hope people really listen to this. Before I left for the US the last time, um, I went to the mall. I wanted to buy a few things that I would take, to travel. And I So I bought the things I wanted to buy, and I came back to the car, and I wanted to put them in the boot. And two children walked up to me, and they were like, um, uncle, give us money. And I was about to look in my pocket, and one of the kids just shouted, he just said, chess master. And I just looked at him like, how did you know me? And he said something. And back in December, and if people that follow our project very closely, when in that Jakonde, that Lekki all the way to Jakonde Expressway, all those children that, along that way, the road, that are always there at the traffic lights begging for money. We did a project there where we gathered all of them together behind Naked Art Gallery, and for like a month we were teaching them chess, mental math, basic literacy and numeracy, and we staged an intervention there, and now we're able to get them away from there, from that slum, that ghetto that they used to live in, and pick plastic, scrap, and do drugs. So we'll stay with them the entire month. So after the project, we did a tournament for the kids where we also dressed them up in Agbada and all of that. And that child that came up to me and said, chess master, it wasn't a part of that program, but on the day of the tournament, he was there just watching from a distance. And you remember the chants that were saying that chess players observe. And he remembered that. And when he saw me, he recognized me and he said, chess players observe. And that made me smile, And I was trying to talk to the boy. The boy's name is Yusuf. He's 13. And he had been on the streets by himself for like 5 years. So you can imagine a boy that young having to live on the streets for 5 years. And I asked him, why are you there? He said, his mother died and his dad wanted to use him for money ritual. And I was like, wow, how do you know this? And he said that was why he ran away from home, and he has been on the streets ever since then. Now, that happened while I was talking to him. Somebody was driving past, in a Range Rover, and she wound down and she saw me and she was like, oh my God, Tunde Omokoye, I follow you, do you have some time for a conversation? And she came down from her car and walked up to me while I was talking to that kid. And she was like, she follows our work, she would like to support. But more importantly, she was looking for a chess coach for her son, Jaden. And she told her son to step out of the car. Soft boy, maybe he was like 10 years old with his Gucci sandals. And he came down from the car. And you know what happened? That boy, Jaden, was standing side by side with the Yusuf kid. And Yusuf is a street kid, but in that moment, you could see that his demeanor just really changed. He didn't know what to say because Jaden was speaking Queen's English, and I wanted him to talk to Yusuf to get to know him. And, Yusuf immediately, his countenance changed, and he couldn't participate in that conversation because he didn't know how to speak English. And it just felt, very different in that moment. And guess what? So I spoke to Jaden and the mom, I gave her my number, and they left. Now,
Today, sorry, today, if I may cut in just a minute. So this is the DoRight Initiative. We try to do right with time. Our time is going to be fast. No problem. No problem. Just because of the audience, we really would like to finish at 7:30 on the dot.
I know.
Because from you. We could just extend by 2-3 minutes. I want to apologize ahead.
I'm done. I probably.
Yeah.
Anyway, the essence of the story was, if I wasn't there in that moment, there was no basis that would have brought Jaden and Yusuf together to have a conversation there, on our society at large, where, there's this dichotomy between the upper class and the lower class. Jaden and Yusuf will never go to the same school. They are going to live very different lives. So somebody has to stand in that gap. Right. If I wasn't present, that interaction would have never happened. Now, Jaden will leave that moment with maybe a different understanding of Yusuf's situation. And because it is people like Jaden that will go on to maybe go to Harvard and come back and build solutions that people like Yusuf will need to live in society. So I think that is my role in this. And that is what drives me, that, if through the work that I do, people can see children like Yusuf a bit differently, then my work here is important. And I always think of it, through that frame, that the things that I do, they matter to the world, they matter to society, because I'm standing in an important gap. And, on the final note, we should all take up this mantle as well, in our own capacity, that if you stand somewhere that people see people that have been neglected, then your work is important. And that is your place in this world. And if you do it well, then we can change the world. We can change the world as we know it. And that is what drives me, because, my role is to bridge an important gap, and I will continue to stand in that gap for as long as I can.
Thank you very, very much, Tunde, for all right then. So for those on the call, like I said, I apologize upfront for stretching the time 2-3 minutes, or maximum of 5 minutes above time. We'd like to play the final video about DoRight awareness. Can we quickly have the video now? Thank you very much. Then we'll come back to close. Thank you. All right, thank you very much and welcome back from the break. Again, on behalf of the DoRight Initiative, I want to say thank you so much for your time and attention. Tunde, thank you so much. This has been a most impactful, and life-transforming conversation. Thank you so much. But just before we go up, I'd just like to round up on a few points that I picked from our conversation. That's number one, that the change that we seek has to be at the fundamental and cellular level of our society. Nigeria has a future that is worth fighting for. It is going to be an ugly fight, but we cannot afford to abdicate the responsibility of the fight to someone else. The fight that we seek to fight cuts across all the stratas of our national life. We will need a lot of will and tenacity to fight this fight till the end, and we will need to be willing to invest time in the future that we see, and we need to be willing to invest in the future that we see, and even in the future that we cannot see. We need to seek for opportunities to build sustainable impact. We need a high level of patience to effect change. Change will come, but it's going to take time. Let's use empathy. Let's use empathy as the basis for engaging with our society. We can learn to love people when we understand their stories. We need to engage with the power of one. An idea is not complete until other people can find their place in it. You can't afford to change. You can't afford to effect change in isolation. You need vision carriers. You need to understand the problem you want to solve first. Then ingeniously engage or tell your stories in the most relatable with your stakeholders to get lasting impact. It's also good to have an idea, but someone has to pay for it, and all you need to do is to effectively communicate the value to your potential investors. Start first and make the first sacrifice from your